Mizuto is a loser virgin until his ex-girlfriend becomes his stepsister and they did dirty things together. In the past, Mizuto and Yume became a so-called couple during 8th and 9th grade. Like many relationships at that age have ended badly, leaving them both bitter about each other and the idea of romance. However, fate had different plans for them. Their parents got married, turning these ex-lovers into new step-siblings. Now, Yume and Mizuto disagree about where they should go, each having their own ideas but unable to agree. When their mother walks in, she asks what's going on, and they both explain they were waiting for her at the door. They argue before and after their mother leaves, reverting to disliking each other. They argue about each other's attitude, given their past as an ex-couple trying to hide it from their parents, which is quite awkward. That night, the family gathered for dinner, and after eating, the ex-couple washed dishes together. Their parents looked at them proudly for deciding to live together. After calling it a night, Mizuto went to his room to read a book. A few moments later, Yu knocked on his door and came in. She complained about how long they would be on a first-name basis, so Mizuto asked her how she wanted to be addressed. Yume replied that she wanted to be called Omi-chan as the elder, but Mizuto argued that they were born on the same day, November 3rd. Yu countered by pointing out that she was born at 11:04 a.m., while Mizuto was born at 11:34 a.m. I bet she waited a long time to mention that, he thought. However, he also noted that they're not even real siblings, so what's the point? That's when Yume suggested a pretend game where they act like innocent siblings, but as soon as the situation becomes inappropriate, whoever gets caught will lose and be the younger one. Mizuto agreed to the terms and Yume went on her way and touched Mizuto's things in his room like a normal sibling would. Mizuto understood why Yume proposed the game, so he decided to play his cards right and approach Yume in the gentlest way possible. This reminded Yume of the boy she had fallen for before, causing her to blush as she folded like paper, not the way siblings do. This made Mizuto proud, forcing her to call him Oni-san, and for some reason, this had an effect on Mizuto, making him blush slightly. Mizuto acted cool about it, but Yume was bothered by how easily Mizuto said hurtful things. So he patted her head, but Yume didn't let him and stormed off. The day after that, they went to their first day of school. They had to tolerate each other even at school since they were classmates because of their surnames. While welcoming the students, Yu gave the speech as she represented junior high, making a good first impression with her classmates and gaining instant popularity. Then there's Mizuto getting annoyed after class when some other guy classmates approached him just to get close to his stepsister. Naturally, Mizuto wasn't happy about it, so he went to the bathroom to give himself some time to think. Those same guys continued their conversation about Yume and her beauty, which was awkward since they were also talking about his ex. Later, Yume went home earlier than Mizuto. The next day, the same guys greeted Mizuto and Yume intervened, linking her arms with his and pulling them close to her chest. This surprised them, but Yume explained that her stepbrother wasn't fond of talking. After they reached their lockers, her mood shifted like a two-faced cat. After school, they were alone since their parents would be home late, so they decided to cook. While Mizuto was thinking about what to eat, Yume remembered the sensation on his shoulder, which made her blush. Ironically, their meal was also chicken breast. Even while eating, Yume couldn't stop thinking about it. She blamed Mizuto for not thinking about the incident earlier, but Mizuto had forgotten about it until Yume reminded him. After eating, Yume took an angry bath looking like her rubber duck until she got an idea. Impulsively, she went outside with a towel, while Mizuto was peacefully reading a book in the living room. Mizuto choked on his drink, not expecting Yume to come out so casually. His reaction satisfied her, so she played along more and sat down casually, saying it's what normal siblings do. That's when her towel came loose and she almost exposed herself. She realized what she was doing and Mizuto understood she thought he would act, but instead, she covered him with his jacket, scolding her for being impulsive. Yume stood up but stumbled. Mizuto was there to catch her, and they ended up on the couch, way too close in the gap. Mizuto felt something and was about to kiss her for some reason, but footsteps could be heard as their parents finally came home. They couldn't be seen together like that, so Mizuto made Yume hide inside the sofa, feeling quite awkward about what might have happened. In today's school session, the students were doing fitness tests. A guy named Kawanami approached Mizuto and asked to be his partner. Of course, Mizuto already knew he was befriending him to get close to Yume, but Kawanami assured him he had no such intention. Afterward, the girls went to the medical room to get their BMI checked. Yume's classmate Minami was so focused on Yume's milkers. Minami invited Yume, admiring her for having such a voluptuous figure. Yume explained that she had the same problem before, which intrigued Minami even more, wondering how Yume had gained such a figure within a year. Minami hugged Yume, thanking her for giving her hope. After taking their BMI, they went to the gym and got ready to start their first set. Minami told Yume she was not good at sports, but the opposite was true. Yume didn't disappoint them and saw Mizuto and Kawanami on the other side. Seeing Mizuto give up on his sit-ups, Yume vowed not to be like him. So she did her best and reached 32 reps. They continued from a grip test to running in the field. After finishing, Yume suddenly lost consciousness, and Mizuto was surprisingly there to catch her before handing her over to Minami. They went to the nurse's office to let Yume rest. That's when she confessed to Minami that she had been secretly training in her room, afraid that people would think she wasn't worthy of being a representative. Minami thinks she's admirable and feels relieved that Yume is just a human with feelings. Because of that, they form a bond and are now on a first-name basis. They returned to their classroom and saw Mizuto in uniform. He was teasing Yume, and Minami could tell that Mizuto was gentle towards her, making her flattered. The next day, Minami was upset after Mizuto told her that she couldn't make it because of her fever. Kawanami was there to cheer her up and tease her, but it didn't help much. Minami told Mizuto that she decided to visit Yume after class, and Kawanami also wanted to join. But in the end, only Minami went. She bought ingredients to make Yume some food. They went in, and Yume was in bed sleeping. She noticed that she had a visitor and almost asked for Mizuto. Now that Yume was awake, they went to the kitchen and cooked porridge. While cooking, Minami, who was good at reading people, could tell that Mizuto had a girlfriend before. Mizuto didn't say anything about it, and Minami went to feed Yume after they cooked. As the sun set, Minami went home. Mizuto informed Yume that Minami was gone, but Yume only wanted to hold Mizuto's hand to fall asleep. It seemed like Mizuto was the one holding something else. Mizuto reminisced about their time in junior high when he and Yume were a couple who shared book reviews. They were a normal couple back then, but broke up over a small misunderstanding. Years later, they found out their parents had remarried, and at that moment they knew they were doomed. Now they're siblings with a past. Back to the present, Mizuto stayed with her and did everything she asked him to do. That's when Mizuto got suspicious and measured Yume's temperature, finding out that her fever had gone down and she was just pretending to be sick. Mizuto reprimanded her for taking advantage of him whenever she pleased, but since Yume was still recovering, he decided to let it slide this time. Yume, feeling bashful, asked him not to leave her and reassured her that he wouldn't go anywhere. Let's recall the time when Yume was infatuated with Mizuto during junior high. She was fixated on an eraser that Mizuto had given her, placing it in a chest along with other gifts he had bestowed upon her. She treated this chest with a reverence akin to a shrine, as if performing a daily ritual like a devout follower. In the present, Yume is seen with Mizuto's underwear, inhaling its scent like an obsessed girlfriend or sister. Ultimately, she blamed her relapse on Mizuto, questioning why he wore that particular underwear and how they were even supposed to be worn. She overanalyzed the situation, daydreaming about getting caught by Mizuto and imagining the consequences. To conceal her secret desires, she waited until everyone was asleep, then sneaked into Mizuto's room to return the underwear where it belonged. However, she was surprised to find Mizuto also sneaking towards her room, holding her bra. This created an awkward situation. Yume candidly admitted that she had relapsed into her old habits and confessed that she used to keep everything Mizuto gave her. He brushed it off as unimportant, but the redness in his ears betrayed his true feelings. Yume, embarrassed, asked why he had her bra, and Mizuto explained that it was an accident. He found it in the washing machine, and when his dad passed by, he had no choice but to bring it to his room. Regarding Yume, she accepted Mizuto's story as her own without rephrasing it. Yume questioned Mizuto if he had done anything strange, like tampering with her bra, such as poking it. Mizuto denied it, though with an awkward hesitation that seemed to confirm her suspicion, and similarly denied sniffing it too. Since they both lost the game, Mizuto suggested they issue an order that didn't break any rules. For his command, Mizuto instructed Yume not to interfere with his life outside the house. After all, siblings shouldn't meddle in each other's affairs, right? Yume agreed, and they moved on. After school that day, Yume spotted Mizuto with another girl who resembled her from junior high. She assumed this was probably what Mizuto meant by his order. The following day after class, Yume returned home and noticed a pair of loafers. She took a photo as evidence and called Mizuto, asking him to pick up something in her room, which was a lie. Mizuto agreed, and once he left, Yume hurried into his room but found only Mizuto. Yume felt frustrated for not catching her in time. Mizuto was puzzled, so Yume explained that she saw him bringing girls into the house. Mizuto insisted that he was alone, but Yume showed him the photo as proof. For some reason, Mizuto asked to check her room, but there was nothing there, leaving Mizuto even more confused than Yume. Although he acted strangely about a chair, claiming he was just tired, this made Yume overthink, wondering if Mizuto and the girl were up to something elsewhere. In reality, the girl was secretly Minami in disguise, wearing a wig. She had persuaded Mizuto to marry her so she could get closer to Yume and live with her under the same roof. Mizuto was at a loss, so he called Kawanami for assistance. The only suggestion Kawanami could offer was for Mizuto to keep rejecting her. If that didn't work, Kawanami had another idea that left Mizuto stunned. Later that evening, Mizuto went to Yoon's room and invited her on a date. The next day, Yoon was eagerly waiting for Mizuto, but before long, a strikingly handsome man approached her. It was Mizuto. Seeing Mizuto dressed so well felt like a dream come true for Yoon, and she couldn't help but admire him, silently praising whoever styled his hair. They went inside and stood in the long queue for tickets to the aquarium. They were going on an aquarium date, a common activity for couples which made Yoon overanalyze their situation. The more Yoon gazed at Mizuto, the more she couldn't stop thinking about how attractive he was. When they reached the counter, they got their tickets and Mizuto took her hand, leading her inside. Meanwhile, two people were secretly following them. It was Minami and Kawanami, who were also subtly having a date while spying on them. Mizuto was aware of their surveillance as it was all part of Kawanami's plan. Before Mizuto met up with Yoon that day, he had met with Kawanami, who had given him advice, helped him dress up, and styled his hair. Their goal was to break two hearts with one stone. Kawanami instructed Mizuto to compliment Yoon on her dress in a specific way. Though Mizuto found it challenging, he managed to do it, even though he thought he had failed when Yoon kept glaring at him. However, from Minami and Kawanami's perspective, it looked like they were getting along. Although the atmosphere between them was tense and awkward, the place was getting crowded, so Mizuto pulled her closer to him. Mizuto's cologne clouded Yoon's thoughts, but she composed herself and shot him a glare. Seeing her glaring, Mizuto felt guilty, but she couldn't help but feel drawn to him. They looked more like a couple than siblings. Mission accomplished. Afterward, they took a break and went to their respective bathrooms. Mizuto called Kawanami to discuss their situation, but Kawanami couldn't stop giggling since their plan was working. Mizuto decided he couldn't let the awkwardness linger, so he came up with a plan. Meanwhile, Yoon went to another restroom and got lost on the way. Now she's sitting somewhere else in the building. Before she could get upset, Mizuto called her and told her to stay put. This reminded Yoon of her first date with Mizuto, where she also got lost. She couldn't shake the thought of Mizuto being gentle toward her instead of his usual teasing. She was becoming convinced they were meant to be together. Later, Mizuto arrived with a drink for Yoon, teasing her for her poor sense of direction. It was lighthearted teasing, but enough to make them both feel comfortable. The day continued with the two step-siblings arguing and debating various topics from books to sharks. For Mizuto, it was better to harbor some animosity since their breakup, everything and everyone irritated him. But now that the bond of being a couple was broken, they had no obligation to preserve anything. In short, they had nothing to lose now that they were step-siblings. To him, it was better this way than maintaining their previous relationship. The day ended, and they went home separately. Yoon heads home first, and Mizuto feels a bit nostalgic. Minami calls out to Mizuto from behind, pretending they bumped into each other by chance, unaware that Mizuto knew they had been trailing him the whole time. Eventually, Minami apologizes for sneaking into his house the other day, justifying it by saying it was Mizuto's fault for leaving the door unlocked. Despite this, Minami wonders if Mizuto will tell Yoon about her. Mizuto considers it and replies that he won't as long as she respects certain boundaries. He decides against it because he knows Minami is an important friend to Yoon. Minami feels relieved but refuses to thank Yoon. Meanwhile, Mizuto notices an extra fifth chair at her dining table and asks about it. Minami explains that she likes to pretend play and apologizes, assuring him that she would still be mindful of her actions. However, she won't stop pressuring Mizuto to marry her unless she finds someone else. The day isn't over yet, and Yoon is still troubled by thoughts of the girl, who is secretly Minami. She goes into detective mode but refuses to let the date end on that note. Later, when Mizuto arrives home, Yoon asks him to let her record him as one of the requests he can't refuse. Mizuto obliges and goes into modeling mode while Yoon excitedly takes pictures of him, her obsession re-emerging. As they continue, Mizuto offers to grant her one more wish. Yoon, of course, doesn't refuse and shyly asks him to hug her from behind and whisper in her ear. Mizuto happily obliges and they embrace closely for a while. When Monday arrives, they head to school, and it turns out Yoon and Minami's friendship is still going strong. Kawanami advises Mizuto to come to him if he ever has trouble with Minami, leading Mizuto to suspect that Kawanami might be her ex-boyfriend. In junior high, the campus hosted an overnight camp. Mizuto stepped outside to gaze at the moon and found Yoon in another room also watching it. They talked while Mizuto helped her with curry ingredients, then watched the moon together. Mizuto still remembers that night clearly. It's one of his core memories. In the present, Yoon asked Mizuto about their Mother's Day plans. Mizuto wasn't interested as he wasn't used to such things, but Yoon wanted them to pick a gift together since it would please her mom to see them acting like siblings. Mizuto refused, preferring to spend the weekend reading, but Yoon returned dressed to go out. Seeing her looking so nice, Mizuto was stunned and couldn't hide his reaction, even dropping his book. Yoon, pleased with his response, teased that siblings shouldn't look at each other that way. In the end, Mizuto had no choice but to go along. They took a crowded train to the mall, where a small jolt made Mizuto lose his balance and get close to Yoon. As he tried to move away, Yoon told him it was pointless. At the mall, they picked out possible gifts, considering a frying pan or cutlery with their faces on it, but ultimately chose a bouquet of flowers for their mother. They expressed their gratitude to their mother for taking care of them, and she cried with happiness. She quickly hid her tears by hurrying to the kitchen and placing the flowers in a jar. Yoon felt relieved to see her mother so joyful, but Mizuto went to the altar to pray for his mother. Though it would be comforting to think Mizuto found motherly love through Yoon's mom, Yoon noticed the door open and saw Mizuto. He saw her too, so she entered and comforted him by leaning on him as his older sister. Afterward, they stayed and talked about their parents. Mizuto shared his plan to give their dad and stepmom some alone time since they hadn't had the chance to enjoy married life yet. Yoon suggested giving them dinner or travel vouchers, but they couldn't afford it. Mizuto proposed that they spend a night elsewhere, but Yoon panicked at the thought of being alone with him. Renting a room was expensive, and they needed their parents' permission to stay in a hotel, so Mizuto jokingly suggested a love hotel. Yoon was so shocked she would rather die than go there. The next day, Mizuto found another solution. He would stay at Kawanami's boarding house, while Yoon would stay with Minami. Since the houses were next to each other, it would feel like a double date. On the day of the plan, Minami was excited and silently thanked Mizuto for giving her time alone with Yoon. However, Kawanami spoiled her mood by telling her to behave and pointing out that Yoon felt left out. Minami clung to Yoon's arm, leaving the boys behind as they headed up the building to their rooms, warning each other not to disturb their peace. Once settled, Yoon and Mizuto asked about their relationship. They explained that they had been childhood friends since primary school, but Kawanami added that although they were once close, they had since drifted apart. Mizuto didn't press further, allowing Kawanami to ask about Mizuto and Yoon's sibling bond, jokingly hinting if he had seen Yoon's milkers. Mizuto firmly denied it, but Kawanami teased that he was the only one who would see Yoon's melons. Yoon responded with a loud bang on the wall, and Minami tried to stop Kawanami from further teasing. Mizuto got his revenge by tying Kawanami to the bed and reading his diary out loud, revealing his dream of becoming a police officer and marrying Minami, which earned another bang on the wall, this time from Minami. Later, the group went to a nearby restaurant for dinner, where an awkward silence was broken by Minami and Kawanami bickering like a couple. As they ate, Minami asked Mizuto for help with studying, but he suggested that Yoon was the smarter one, as he only relied on instinct to score well. Once they reached their room, Mizuto was studying, while Kawanami texted Minami, venting about Mizuto's nerves. Kawanami asked about the exam, but Mizuto only described it as terrifying, so he couldn't risk not studying. Feeling guilty, Kawanami got up, knowing he couldn't interfere with this crucial moment. Later that night, when the city was mostly asleep, Mizuto and Yoon both stepped out onto the balcony. Surprised to see each other, they'd reminisce about a junior high camp memory. Yoon almost confessed her lingering feelings, but decided to enjoy the view instead, accepting the reality that they remained step-siblings. Days passed and midterms approached. After class, Minami invited Yoon to walk home together, but Yoon politely declined, saying she needed to study. Yoon, who had topped the entrance exam, felt the pressure to stay on top. When she got home, she started studying right away. She recalled when Mizuto had beaten her in math during her second junior year, which pushed her to work even harder. But when she glanced at Mizuto, he seemed indifferent, which felt like a punch to the gut. As they first talked about books in the library, Mizuto complimented Yoon on being the top student in math over a detective novel. Yoon realized that Mizuto cared, even though he didn't show it. She snapped back to reality and went to get a glass of milk, only to find Mizuto casually reading in the living room. It bothered her to see him so relaxed, so she reminded him to study, warning that he would lose to her since being at the top was her place. Mizuto accepted the challenge and became motivated to compete. The next day, on their way to school, Mizuto noticed Yoon looked tired, guessing she had worked hard to stay on top. Yoon agreed, saying it was important to her since she had topped the entrance exam and felt the pressure most top students do. On the first day of exams, Yoon answered all the questions and scored 94%. Knowing Mizuto was good at language, she worried about how close his score might be. Later, curious about his results, she sneaked into his room but was shocked when she found out he hadn't answered the last question, which was easy. She stormed into the living room and scolded him, wondering why he didn't bother answering. Mizuto just shrugged it off. Yoon didn't want to let it go, not wanting to be the reason Mizuto intentionally failed his tests. She also felt insulted by Mizuto, as if he thought she was too dumb to be the best. Girls can be complicated sometimes. Their mother saw this tense moment. Yoon was about to hit Mizuto, but her mom intervened. Mizuto finally snapped, saying Yoon was desperate to stay on top, and even though he purposely sacrificed himself, Yoon was still angry. Their mother, frightened, ran away, leaving them to argue. Yum was confused because Mizuto usually wouldn't act this way. She hurried to her room, more determined than ever, and studied hard, sacrificing sleep. When the results came out, Yum placed second, just below Mizuto, who she saw as a genius. Although Yum felt isolated and belittled, Minami's cheers for her second-place finish made her tear up. Her friends congratulated her for doing her best and comforted her. It was then she realized she couldn't let Mizuto treat her that way. She wanted to be reliable for him. She rushed to the library to find Mizuto and saw him talking to a girl named Izana who had a wolf cut. The two were peacefully reading a book when Mizuto asked Izana her thoughts on friendship. They discussed the philosophical meaning of friendship, and Mizuto realized Izana was his most like-minded friend, nothing more. After school, Mizuto and Izana see Minami and Yum together, and Izana suddenly feels nervous around extroverts. The tension between Mizuto and Izana makes Yum jealous, so she leaves. Izana asks who Yum is, and Mizuto explains she's his stepsister, causing Izana to react weirdly. Yum struggles with jealousy that night but decides to ignore Mizuto. Over the past few days, Yum has been gentler with Mizuto, which bothers him. He confides in Izana, who advises him to follow his heart, even though she finds it hard to read people. This gives Mizuto an idea. He realizes he's better at reading people's emotions. He reassures Izana not to worry about understanding him, as their friendship isn't idealistic. Meanwhile, Yum enjoys ignoring Mizuto, but that changes when he shows up at her door in her favorite outfit and hairstyle. Without saying anything, he approaches her, corners her, and points out her racing pulse, something siblings shouldn't feel. After teasing each other, Mizuto tells Yum her distance has upset him, and she admits she was jealous of Izana, wondering if it's okay to feel that way. Mizuto teases her again, and they return to their usual banter. A few days later, Yum and Izana meet again, properly introducing themselves. Izana awkwardly shakes Yum's hand but manages. Mizuto asks Izana if she has feelings for him, but she wishes she were a boy, which changes their view of her. Mizuto and Izana say goodbye, and he supports her bravery in talking to others. They look more like siblings. One day in class, Izana discovered a note in her locker, revealing that someone was aware of her secret and invited her to a certain place to keep it concealed. However, it turned out to be a prank by Minami and Yum. Although they were confident about her secret, they were aware of Izana's feelings for Mizuto, even though she continuously denied them and claimed they were just friends. When they showed her a video of Mizuto asleep, she couldn't help but blush. Izana's denial of her feelings for Mizuto was as believable as a penguin pretending it could fly. Izana was unaware of any romantic emotions, including those for Mizuto, as she'd never felt them before. If she did develop feelings for him, it would be her first experience with love. She also saw Mizuto purely as a friend, and as long as she could talk to him like usual, that was enough for her. Her heart was like a warm, cozy studio with a no love allowed sign on the door. Yum noticed similarities between herself and Izana from junior high: low self-esteem, fear of failure, and sticking with situations she didn't enjoy. Yum had managed to overcome those hurdles, and seeing this, she offered Izana advice, encouraging her not to give up if she wanted to become Mizuto's girlfriend. Their plan started with Izana observing Mizuto in the library to devise a strategy, while Yum and Minami hid, watching through their camera to zoom in and catch Mizuto's reactions. But it seemed like Mizuto didn't even care about Izana's figure and casually told her her underwear was showing. Minami suggested Izana could use physical touch to remind Mizuto that she's a girl, believing that over time this physical closeness would leave a lasting impression on him. Following Minami's suggestion, Izana decided to make a bold move by asking Mizuto to check her book while deliberately pressing her milkers against him. In response, he nonchalantly commented again that her milkers were touching him. She then confessed that she did it on purpose, knowing Mizuto prefers girls with smaller milkers and only wanted to highlight the allure of a fuller figure. Her deliberate milkers contact was meant to serve as an educational display, showcasing the wonders of female anatomy and the beauty of curves to an unwitting admirer of flatness. For Izana, a romantic relationship goes beyond friendship, and she doesn't want to jeopardize their bond just because she has feelings for him. After recognizing their mistake, Yum and Minami apologize to Izana, reassuring her that they don't want her to change, encouraging her to remain true to herself. However, they acknowledge that Izana's insecurity about her femininity is an issue. To support her, they decide to give her a makeover, including makeup. When Mizuto notices her new look, he mistakenly assumes her red lips are a result of eating fried food. As Izana tries to get closer, Mizuto continuously pulls away, valuing his personal space deeply. He warns her that if she persists, he'll show her just how sacred his personal space is, as if it were a closely guarded treasure. Minami advised Izana to confess her feelings to Mizuto soon, suggesting that waiting too long could make it more difficult, especially since he sees her as nothing more than a friend. Izana views herself as gloomy and difficult, with her only confidence resting in her ample milkers. With Minami and Yume's support, Izana was preparing to finally confess her feelings to Mizuto. Though she felt anxious, she managed to express her genuine emotions, sharing how thankful she was for the chance to ask someone like him. However, despite enjoying Izana's company, Mizuto gently told her that he couldn't pursue a romantic relationship with her. He explained that his heart could only be fully open to one person who sadly didn't belong to him. This person, who still occupies his thoughts, refuses to let go. As Izana poured out her feelings to Mizuto, Yume and Minami secretly eavesdropped on the conversation. In the end, Mizuto gently turned Izana down, confessing that someone else already holds his heart. He reassured her that it wasn't her fault and there was nothing wrong with her. It was simply a matter of his affections being directed elsewhere. Sometimes, even the most perfect puzzle piece doesn't fit into the picture. The episode begins with Mizuto and Izana casually spending time together as if the recent confession and rejection never happened. Izana wondered if she could take a closer look at Mizuto's bookshelf, particularly to see which illustration he had folded in his light novel, hoping to gain insight into which character had captured his imagination during his primary or junior high years. It was as if unlocking his literary preferences could offer clues to the secrets of his romantic journey. The day before Izana was set to visit Mizuto's house, she met up with Yume and Minami, who were excited to give her a makeover. They didn't want her to embarrass herself with her usual unfashionable clothes. However, Izana didn't have any money at the time. Fortunately, Yume and Minami offered to pay for her under one condition. Izana had to wear whatever they picked for her and couldn't refuse. It was a thrilling fashion adventure full of anticipation and the promise of an unforgettable transformation. When Izana tried on the first outfit that Minami had chosen for her, she felt rather uneasy as it was far too revealing and seductive for her liking. However, that wasn't the only thing that grabbed Yume and Minami's attention. They were stunned to see how large her milkers were, resembling the size of a ball, which Izana described as being a G-cup. In a surprising moment, Minami attempted to touch them, and for the first time, they realized just how bouncy it could be. The main challenge was dealing with her considerable G-cup size, and they understood that before moving forward, they had to find a way to minimize or hide her bust if they were to mimic Yu's style completely. Copying Yume's look would be seen as violating the unspoken rules of the girl's world, where balance and individuality were key. If Yume adopted a new style, their similarities would vanish, leaving them in a tricky situation, teetering on the edge of a fashion dilemma where the unspoken rules of the girl's world threatened to pop their fashion bubble. Yume had long avoided wearing clothes that emphasized her body's curves. Reflecting now, she realizes how naive she was back then. During her junior high days, Yume had a boyfriend, and they arranged to go on a date one weekend. She spent hours putting together the perfect outfit right up until the last minute. When the date finally came, Yume wore something cute and charming, a true master of last-minute style. However, when her boyfriend saw her, he didn't comment on her outfit or seem to take much notice. Yume had eagerly awaited a compliment all day, but eventually she started to believe that her outfit must have been so unappealing that he didn't want to embarrass her by mentioning it. Yume's excitement for a compliment on her carefully coordinated outfit hit its peak, only to be greeted by her boyfriend's lack of awareness. However, just as they were about to go their separate ways, her boyfriend unexpectedly remarked that her outfit was adorable and suggested she avoid wearing a skirt outdoors unless they were indoors. This comment made Yume overjoyed, and she couldn't stop giggling when she got home. From that day on, she always dressed to Mizuto's preferences, turning it into a daily fashion habit. When Izana arrived at Mizuto's library-like room, she immediately picked up a book and started reading it. Yume, who was also present, was taken aback by the closeness between the two. For instance, Izana could ask Mizuto to give her a massage and even help her put on her socks. It was an unexpected display of intimacy and playful humor that left Yume questioning the boundaries of friendship and the full extent of Izana's teasing skills. In the end, Izana enjoyed her time at Mizuto's house, and despite still feeling the sting of rejection, she was grateful to have a friend like Mizuto. In the past, when Mizuto and Yume were romantically involved before becoming step-siblings, there was a moment when they shared a kiss in a secluded spot near their house. Sometime later, Mizuto invited Yume to his room, marking a pivotal event. It was the first time he had ever asked a girl over, and similarly, it was Yume's first experience in a boy's room. As Yume prepared to leave and head home, she couldn't help but ponder how she and Mizuto had spent the last 6 months together, holding hands and sharing kisses. She thought their relationship was moving forward, possibly nearing a critical point. Yet on that day, nothing particularly momentous occurred between them. It felt as though Cupid had hit the pause button, leaving their love story in a state of limbo. Simultaneously, Mizuto felt frustrated with himself, having mentally prepared for that day only for his plans to fizzle out. It seemed as if fate was toying with their emotions. During their third year, Mizuto and Yume were placed in separate classes, Mizuto in Class 1 and Yume in Class 2. Yum worried that her school days would become dull and feared she wouldn't make any friends. To comfort her, Mizuto reassured her, saying they could still meet up at the library after school, making it their regular rendezvous spot. "Worry not, our bond will flourish beyond the confines of the classroom," Mizuto said. "Let the library be our sanctuary where we'll meet after school." However, everything shifted when Yum made a new friend after noticing her reading a book. She was ecstatic to have someone else to spend time with besides Mizuto and began arriving late to their usual hangout, often because she was with her new friend. When Mizuto asked if they could hang out one weekend, Yum declined, saying she already had plans with her friend. This time, Mizuto found himself navigating the unfamiliar waters of no longer being Yum's sole weekend companion. This left Mizuto feeling quite downhearted, and when Yum was late once again, he unintentionally raised his voice during their conversation that evening. He immediately regretted it and resolved to apologize to her the next day. However, when Yum finally declined her friend's invitation and met Mizuto on time at the library, she was caught off guard. She hadn't expected to see Mizuto talking to another girl or sitting in her usual spot. When Yum confronted Mizuto about seeing him with someone else in her place at the library, she completely misunderstood the situation. She began to imagine that the girl had been taking her place on all the days she had been late, leading to their first significant misunderstanding. In this moment of confusion, their relationship faced its first serious challenge, reminding them of how crucial honest communication and clarifying intentions were. Mizuto reflected on his actions, realizing his own stubbornness and jealousy have driven him to raise his voice at Yum. The next day, they coincidentally ran into each other at a bookstore. Seizing the moment, Mizuto decided it was time to reconcile with Yum, as he didn't want them to keep pretending around each other at school. He offered a genuine apology for his behavior in the library, but Yum remained silent, not offering an apology in return. This left Mizuto wondering whether they had reconciled simply for the sake of it. Her quietness made him question whether she had enrolled in some kind of silent apology academy. After more than a month of not seeing each other, the anniversary of their relationship approached. Yum eagerly waited for Mizuto to reach out to her, but he never did. As Christmas and Valentine's Day passed, they celebrated separately. When graduation drew near, Mizuto brought up the idea of breaking up and Yum agreed. They both decided it was time to go their separate ways. Just a few days later, Mizuto's father introduced him to his soon-to-be step-sibling, who, to his surprise, turned out to be his former girlfriend, Yum. It was an unexpected twist that left them both stunned, realizing that their fates were intertwined once more in the most unforeseen way. That day, a typhoon caused the train to be canceled, preventing their parents from returning home. This left Yum and Mizuto sharing his bed due to the power outage, with the added issue of a cockroach in Yum's room before the lights went out. Jokingly, Yum remarked that she was sure he wouldn't attempt anything, considering he hadn't made a move when they were dating and sharing a room. After some time, as they lay in the dark, Mizuto turned to face her, and for the first time in ages, he saw her face up close. Despite their breakup and the awkward new family dynamic, it was hard for Mizuto to pretend that nothing had changed or that he didn't care anymore. The next morning, Yum playfully accused Mizuto of being afraid of insects, which led to her spending the night in his room. Their parents found the situation hilarious, as it made them look like a couple caught in a quirky situation. They joked that even their relatives back home would laugh at the story during the upcoming festival. It just goes to show how humor can bring people together, even in the most awkward circumstances. In the countryside, most of the fun centered around water activities, so Yum's mom suggested she get a new swimsuit, since all she had was her school one. Yum's mom even managed to get Mizuto to join them on the shopping trip. When Yum asked for his opinion on her chosen swimsuit, Mizuto began to question why he agreed to come. His anxiety spiked when she stepped out in a seductive swimsuit, leaving him speechless. Instead of a compliment, he awkwardly called her thoughtful. Mizuto clearly needed a lesson in giving compliments, leaving Yum unsatisfied and frustrated. She tried to ask for his thoughts on the swimsuit again, but he misread her question, thinking she wanted praise for her body. Misunderstandings like these often lead to amusing situations. On their way home, they unexpectedly arrived at a spot where they'd once shared a kiss. As the wind blew, Yum's cup flew away, and they found themselves face to face in a romantic moment. Yum closed her eyes, remembering their past kisses, while Mizuto briefly did the same. However, instead of leaning in for another kiss, Mizuto playfully flicked her forehead. Love can be unpredictable, and sometimes a forehead flick replaces a tender embrace, bringing laughter instead of romance. Later, while watching a movie, Yum internally fumed as she observed Isana and Mizuto sitting too closely, almost like a couple. Isana unzipped her jacket, revealing her chest slightly and scratched casually, as if no one else was around. Yum's mind raced with wild thoughts, imagining Mizuto touching Isana and them discussing marriage, fueled by jealousy and overthinking. All the cheerful and creative realms our minds can wander into after hours of watching the film. Mizuto asked her to hand him the beverage she was holding, but she hesitated, making no further moves. Instead, she passed him her drink. This small act made Isana realize they had shared an indirect kiss. Although there was no romantic intent, she pondered whether such interactions were common among relatives. Isana left, reflecting on the curious ways thirst could be quenched and the intricacies of family dynamics. The movie was lengthy, and Mizuto began feeling drowsy. Isana teasingly suggested he could rest his head on her lap for a quick nap, which Yoon promptly opposed. Isana even joked about offering a complimentary ear-cleaning service, something Mizuto was afraid of and quite reluctant about. In the end, he unexpectedly drifted into sleep, but in Yoon's lap instead. Mizuto unintentionally fell into a dream and found comfort, not on Isana's lap, but in the softness of Yoon's thighs. Later, Isana and Mizuto's relationship came up in a conversation with Yoon's mother. It was easy to understand why Yoon's mom would inquire about their bond since they did resemble a couple. Yoon's mother then playfully suggested finding herself a charming boyfriend to even the odds and keep Mizuto from having an advantage. However, for Yoon, it wasn't a competition. She believed in waiting patiently. The best approach in the game of love is trusting in the timing of the heart and the power of the unexpected. When they reached their hometown, they reconnected with their grandaunt Natsumerito, who was thrilled to see them return. She even asked about the relationship between Mizuto and Yoon, wondering if they were getting along. They also ran into Madoka and Shikuma, Yu's cousins. Madoka invited them to a barbecue by the riverside, teasing Yu not to forget her swimsuit. "Don't worry," Yu assured, "she'd remember like her life depended on it," especially since Mizuto had helped her pick it out. Madoka, noticing Yu's slender figure and small waist, jokingly asked who selected her swimsuits, fully aware that Mizuto was sitting under a tree absorbed in his book. Madoka found it unfair, remembering how Mizuto had never spoken to her in the past despite her looking after him since kindergarten. He used to ignore her whenever she tried to engage him. It's funny how past interactions can sometimes resurface and surprise us. Later that night, Madoka suggested Yoon find Mizuto, likely in his great-grandfather's study, and ask him to take a bath. When Yoon saw Mizuto reading, she worried that he hadn't marked his place in the book and casually closed it. However, Mizuto assured her he could recall every detail, having read the book in that specific spot every year. The book, Siberia's Dancing Girl, was the autobiography of Mizuto's great-grandfather, detailing his experiences during a 3 to 4 year stay in Siberia around 1945. Mizuto encouraged Yoon to read it, saying she could learn more. As Yu became absorbed in the story, she grew emotional, tears falling onto the pages. When she reached up to wipe away the tears, she noticed faint streaks on the pages, a subtle sign that Mizuto had also cried while reading that particular section. It was a touching reminder of their shared emotional bond with the story and how literature can move us in deep and unforeseen ways. While selecting a kimono for the summer festival, Madoka observed that Yum appeared distracted by something. She inquired if something had happened between her and Mizuto. After a brief hesitation, Madoka began to wonder whether Yum had developed feelings for Mizuto. She sensed that Yum was downplaying her emotions and trying to find a way to avoid dating Mizuto. Wanting to support her friend, Madoka advised Yum to confront her feelings. However, Yum was uncertain about what to do next, so she put herself in Madoka's hands and left the decision to her. Understanding the intricacies of managing emotions and relationships, Madoka arranged for Yum and Mizuto to spend some uninterrupted time together in a room, assuring them that no one would bother them for the next 30 minutes. Initially, Yum was lost in thought, unsure of how to start the conversation. But after mustering her courage, she approached Mizuto. He had been her first love, and when he chose to end their relationship, she felt a sense of relief, believing that her pain, sadness, and loneliness would finally fade. Yet now, as Yoon reflected on their past, she couldn't help but regret how things had turned out. If only they hadn't broken up, if only she had reached out to him during summer break, if only she had given him a gift at Christmas, if only she had made him chocolate on Valentine's Day, if only she had refused his wishes and protected their relationship. These thoughts weighed heavily on her heart. That was all she wanted to convey to him. Yet despite her best attempts, no words seemed to escape her lips. Witnessing Yum's tears, Mizuto grasped the depth of her feelings, and it was enough for him to release any lingering doubts and allow them to revisit their shared history. Sometimes, understanding without words can bridge the chasms of the past and unlock doors to new opportunities. In the previous episode, upon returning to their hometown, Yu mistakenly believed that Madoka was Mizuto's first love, when in fact it was her. A whirlwind of misunderstandings and tangled emotions. The next day, Madoka expressed her feelings upon seeing Yum in a lovely kimono. Mizuto also wore a kimono, which made Yum want to capture a photo of him, though he ended up snapping a picture of them both. It was a joyful reminder that even in unexpected moments and playful surprises, memories are created that shine like fireworks in the night sky. Later that night, Madoka suggested they hold hands, as she once did with Shikuma, but Mizuto dismissed the idea, noting they were old enough not to get lost in a crowd. Not for Yun, though, as she intertwined their hands, insisting it was natural for siblings to do so. They decided to try their luck at a shooting stall, where Shikuma eagerly gave it a go with Madoka's help, making Yun wonder about the siblings' closeness. Unfortunately, they lost the game, and seeing Shikuma's disappointment, Madoka urged Mizuto to give it a shot since Shikuma wanted to win the prize. As Mizuto lined up his shot, Madoka suggested Yum assist him as the elder sister, offering a simple back hug to help him aim. Mizuto was uncertain of the true intention behind this gesture. As Yum leaned in to help him, she unexpectedly lost her balance, causing her melons to lightly brush against his back. To their astonishment, they won the prize, much to Shikuma's joy and gratitude. The comedic twist of an unanticipated outcome was hilarious, and Mizuto couldn't help but wonder if Yum's actions during the shooting game were deliberate. Curious, he asked her about it, and to his relief, Yum assured him that her intentions were pure, and that she wasn't being inappropriate. However, she didn't miss the chance to playfully tease him, suggesting that perhaps Mizuto was more accustomed to such close encounters, especially with girls who often get physically close to him without hesitation. The lighthearted teasing and playful banter that arose from these moments of misunderstood actions kept things fun. Since their family had noble connections, they had reserved a spot to view the fireworks, but just before heading there, they realized Mizuto was missing, prompting Yu to go search for him. Mizuto had long felt a disconnection from the world around him, as if everything he did failed to truly resonate within. He never aimed to mimic the protagonist of No Longer Human, but he struggled to relate to others and merely went through the motions of life. The praise and sympathy he received only confused him further, deepening the void in his heart. The only time he felt truly connected to his emotions was when he lost himself in the world of books. Reading his great-grandfather's novel, Siberia's Dancing Girl, had left a lasting impression on him. Yoon, too, found solace in the world of imagination, and at first their relationship felt effortless and natural. Despite Mizuto's deep frustration during their first outing at the summer festival, he couldn't grasp how someone could be so fragile and unable to manage on their own. Yet Yum had left a lasting imprint on his heart, even more profound than the emotions stirred by reading a novel. It was a testament to the enigmatic power of human connection, where real-life experiences can evoke emotions and depth that surpass even the most impactful literary works. When Yun finally reunited with Mizuto, they began reminiscing about their past, playfully teasing each other. Curiosity got the better of her, and she asked why Mizuto had agreed to date her. He replied that it was likely due to fate, explaining that if he had met Izana before her, he might not have pursued a relationship with Yun. However, what truly mattered was that it was her. As the fireworks illuminated the night sky, they watched the vibrant display together. In that magical moment, Yun seized the opportunity and kissed Mizuto for the second time in her life. With that kiss, she declared her intention to compete for the sole place in Mizuto's heart. Naruto is a loser virgin otaku and a failure to his family who can't even say one word to a girl just like yourself. However, his life suddenly changes when a 4'1" girl tricks him into falling in love with her. It all begins when he visits the library for his usual virgin activities, only to find himself surrounded by women he hates because they're a bunch of loud and annoying pick-me girls. These girls bully him relentlessly because he's a loser virgin, especially after he fumbles and drops his drawings. One of them picks up his sketches and loudly proclaims that he's drawing hentai. Among them is Nagatoro, who introduces herself while ridiculing him in his manga. She quickly notices that his story is a self-insert fantasy, where his character is much cooler than he could ever hope to be. To expose that he is an ugly loser just like you, she dares him to reenact scenes from his manga with her. But when it's time for him to prove himself, he falters completely, reaching peak embarrassment. Nagatoro cooks him so thoroughly that he ends up in tears and takes the L. That evening, the demon girl bullies him yet again, only for the cycle to continue the next day. She even manages to track down his hiding spot. Before she enters, Naoto nervously returns her handkerchief, admitting that he washed it, which surprisingly makes her blush. Following him inside, she teases him about them being alone together, hinting at potential developments. Noticing his art supplies, she offers to model for him, casually unbuttoning her shirt to help him draw her better. He erupts humorously, demanding she act normal, but when he finally begins to draw, he spends more time staring at her than working on the canvas. She notices and decides to motivate him by promising a reward if he manages to focus on creating something instead of just gazing at her. Encouraged, he gets serious and starts sketching her, devoting the entire day to the task. Surprisingly, the result is impressive, even by her standards. True to her word, she prepares to give him his reward and instructs him to close his eyes. Just as he anticipates a kiss, she leans in close but flicks his nose at the last second, laughing at his loser ass. She mocks him again, calling him overly hopeful for thinking a kiss was on the table. She then teases him about avoiding her thighs in the drawing, mocking him until he cries. Later, she jokingly asks him out only for him to fall for it again. When he accuses her of messing with him for amusement, she shoves him into a canal. Despite being soaked and his clothes ruined, he brushes it off, claiming it's no big deal. Amused, she asks if he ever gets angry, acknowledging she's worse than his bullies. However, Naoto isn't one to lose his temper. He simply lets others do as they please until they're done. He even admits that despite her relentless teasing, he doesn't hate it. Actually, he has a bullying kink and enjoys it a lot, but he doesn't even know her name. Curious, he asks her, and she tells him to call her Nagatoro, even writing it on his chest. The next day, Naoto finally finds himself alone in the art room, eager to dive into a manga he bought from Temu. However, his quiet reading session is cut short when Nagatoro shows up to disrupt the peace. Caught off guard, he quickly hides the manga behind his back, but she seems to have an uncanny sense for his mischief and immediately suspects something. Eventually figuring out his ploy, she offers to help him, dropping his defenses only to snatch the manga for herself. She playfully pats him on the back, mocking his attempt to sneak in some risque entertainment, but insists there's no way he'll take the easy road with her. Opening the manga, she's greeted by large anime honkers, which Naoto insists are crucial to the plot. She points to one of the panels, comparing it to him and mocking him for even dreaming of pulling something like that off. In his defense, he only wanted to read the story, which is actually about vampires and true love. To her surprise, she ends up getting drawn into the plot despite the sudden jump scares. She even points out that one of the characters reminds her of Naoto, a poor guy who gets completely sucked by a vampire. But she reassures him, saying he'd be fine because vampires supposedly don't feed on virgin losers like him. This pushes Naoto to his limit, so he demands to know how she even knows he's a virgin. Smirking, she challenges him, then leans in, asking if she can bite his neck just like the vampire in the manga. She assures him it will feel like just a small sting and won't hurt, even though her sharp teeth resemble those of a pit bull. Slowly, she moves closer before pouncing on him like Foxy from Five Nights at Freddy's, declaring that he's her prey now. You can't really blame her. It's quite a good deal. When he nervously asks what would happen if someone saw them, she brushes off the question and starts teasing him, running her fingers along his neck. She leans in for a bite, but the foul stench of his breath like a dead skunk doesn't stop her. She lunges anyway, savoring the moment. Later that day, she follows him home and cheekily asks if it's his first time getting handy. Naoto blushes furiously, his face as red as a tomato, because it's indeed the first time a woman has touched him there. She teases him further, asking if he wants her to do it properly this time, only to trick him by going for his stomach instead of the area he was hoping for. Laughing at his embarrassment, she leaves him flustered and frustrated. That night, while reading hentai, he can't help but imagine Nagatoro giving him some steamy character development, which leaves him restless. The next day, she shows up again, this time proposing a honker's guessing game. The rules are simple. He just has to guess where the seeds are, and the prize is, as she puts it, self-explanatory. When he hesitates, saying he's not into random groping and doesn't see the point, she dangles the prize in front of him. A ticket to make her do anything. He could use it to stop her teasing or go even further, like having her wear a swimsuit or strip down all her clothes. The temptation hangs heavy in the air. He thinks intensely and convinces himself to take action to stop her from tormenting him. The game begins, and Nagatoro impressively starts with 2 bullseyes, hitting the targets with precision, though they're technically misses. Before he can point this out, she plays with it, spinning aimlessly. He pleads with her to stop and admits defeat, but she insists it's his turn. Determined to turn the tables, he focuses and prepares to strike back. As he closes in, aiming for her switches, she shoves him away, declares time's up, and leaves him behind to join her friends after taking a huge L. After suffering a humiliating loss, he heads to a restaurant to work on his manga, only to spot Nagatoro and her friends entering with some guys. It appears to be a double date, and he discreetly eavesdrops on their conversation. The guys ramble about topics like their band, which clearly doesn't interest Nagatoro. One even offers her a chance to listen to his terrible music, but she boldly tells him to quit. The second guy also faces brutal rejection and retreats to the bathroom for the second time. On his way home, Naoto wonders if he's the only one being bullied since the guys were completely crushed too. Suddenly, Nagatoro appears behind him and walks with him, leading to even more teasing. The following day, she returns to the art room and suggests that she could pose as a model for him, but he declines, explaining that he prefers sketching objects rather than people. Undeterred, she suddenly strips down to reveal something unexpected, a school swimsuit. Later, after classes end, a heavy downpour begins, forcing both of them to dash to the closest shed for cover. While they try to dry off, the rain intensifies and she invites him to her house to change into dry clothes. Upon entering, he notices her parents' shoes near the doorway and panics, imagining himself being interrogated by her family, even the family cat. However, she reassures him that no one is home and offers him her brother's clothes to change into. She also hands him a towel to dry off, but instead of using it right away, he fixates on the idea that it's the same towel she likely used earlier, imagining her drying every inch of her body with it. Knowing his thoughts might wander, she smirks but says nothing as she heads to prepare some tea. Once he's dry, she joins him, teasingly pointing out how sus he's been acting since stepping into her house. Aware it's his first time in a girl's room, she asks what he thinks two people typically do in such a situation. He awkwardly answers studying, but she quickly calls him out since there aren't even any exams on the horizon. Then, with a mischievous grin, she places her hand on his and confidently declares that they're about to smash like crazy. Flustered for a moment, he's confused until she clarifies that she's talking about Super Smash Bros., her brother's favorite game. She boasts about being an elite player, but to her dismay, he completely demolishes her in every round, his cocky attitude rubbing her the wrong way as she grows genuinely annoyed by her defeat. He feels like he's been too harsh on her, but after enduring all her teasing, he's finally ready to settle the score. During the next match, he dominates her as usual, but just as he's about to secure victory, she suddenly whispers something in his ear, throwing him off balance and causing him to lose focus and the game. The two continue playing together until the rain lets up. When it's time to part ways, he thanks her for the fun, only for her to casually remark that there won't be a next time. The following day, Naoto faces a new dilemma. The cafeteria is packed, and the only available seats are near her and her group of friends. She waves him over, but this feels like a nightmare for him since these are the same girls who mocked his sketches not long ago. With no other options, he steels himself and sits down. To his horror, she playfully acts as if they're dating, prompting her friends to tease him about whether he's expanded her domain yet. Embarrassed, he stammers, knowing full well that his heavenly restriction, his virginity, makes it obvious he's not her boyfriend. Her overly possessive attitude leads the girls to joke that he's been reverse colonized. The teasing escalates, with Maki ruthlessly calling him subhuman and comparing him to an insect. But just as things seem unbearable, Nagatoro unexpectedly steps in to defend him, telling Maki she's gone too far. Emboldened by her support, Naoto musters the courage to stand up for himself, shouting to the cafeteria that he isn't her boyfriend, only to awkwardly trail off mid-sentence as he tries to focus on eating his lunch. The declaration earns him more laughter, leaving him humiliated once again. Later, Nagatoro asks him why he never fights back, urging him to stand up for himself and even suggesting he slap someone the next time he's insulted. To demonstrate, they act out a scenario, but instead of hitting her, he breaks down crying like a helpless fool. Naturally, this only spurs her to tease him even more. After tolerating enough nonsense, he eventually slaps her hard, but on the wrong cheeks. A few days later, as he's peacefully enjoying his lunch, Maki and Yoshi suddenly appear, shattering his tranquility. At first, he mistakes them for Nagatoro, but quickly realizes they're the absolute last people he wants to see. They've discovered his secret hideout and waste no time resuming their torment. As he eats, they smirk and mock him, then pivot to an absurd topic: melons. They start teasing him about what makes melons so amazing, insinuating he's never touched one before. Apparently, rumors are circulating about him being a virgin, and the two decide it's time to help. Maki boldly asks if he'd like to touch her hysterical pillows, her voice dripping with mockery. Hypnotized like Alex Mason in a trance, he hesitates, but when things take a turn, he makes a break for the door. Yoshi grabs him, however, and forces him to touch what he assumes are Maki's melons, only to realize in utter disappointment that it's just a red bean bun. The two erupt in laughter, further humiliating him. Before the situation can escalate, Nagatoro bursts onto the scene looking furious and ready to fight. The dude retreats in fear, leaving her to confront him. She sarcastically congratulates him on losing his hand virginity, but when he explains it was just a piece of bread, her mischievous side takes over. She comes up with a wicked idea and offers him the chance to squeeze her black bean buns. If he can guess which of the buns hidden under her shirt is softer, she'll reward him with a premium bean bun. Despite his hesitation, she taunts him, calling him a coward, which forces him to muster up the courage. With shaky hands, he carefully reaches out, touches the right one, closes his eyes, and gives it a quick massage, his heart pounding the entire time. As he fumbles, the prized button pops free from her shirt, and when he finally reaches for the left side, my moment arrives. He's touching the real thing, not holding back at all, thoroughly exploring with both hands to confirm it's the premium bun. When he opens his eyes, he confidently identifies the premium bun, but the realization dawns on him he's essentially landed himself in trouble for groping her. Nagatoro doesn't hold back either, retaliating with a flurry of hits using the premium bread as her weapon. 2 days later, life resumes its usual pace and she decides to be his model again, driving an old, slightly worn sofa into the art room to use as her personal lounging spot. Upon entering, she notices he seems a little down, his attention fixated on the baseball captain, who's surrounded by teammates and classmates, celebrating his achievements. He confesses that he's not particularly skilled at much aside from drawing, and receiving praise for it is a rare but uplifting experience. She points out that if he wants to be praised, he should start by acknowledging and appreciating others first, urging him to give her compliments. Anything will suffice as long as it's heartfelt. When he reflects on it, he realizes that almost anything he says could come across as unsettling, so he opts to compliment her hair instead. She chuckles at his playful awkwardness, but playfully demands more compliments. In response, he tells her she's impressively nimble, and that what she did the first time they met was downright impressive. She returns the favor by complimenting him, but not before carefully assessing whether there's anything truly praiseworthy about him. Afterward, they begin their modeling session, and she experiments with a series of poses, many of which are far too bold and suggestive for him, an inexperienced novice to handle. Ultimately, they agree on a more modest pose that allows him to focus on his drawing without feeling too overwhelmed. She casually announces that she'll be taking a nap while he hones his artistic skills. Once she drifts off to sleep, he finally finds the perfect angle to capture her in his sketch, which turns out to be an exceptional piece of work. When she wakes and sees the drawing, she rewards him, not with anything grand, but with a quirky gift, a toy shaped like lips. After spending a week hanging out and enduring some teasing, things begin to improve slightly because Nagatoro starts becoming more playful and physical. When she challenges him to a tickle fight, he initially agrees but loses his nerve when she reveals her school swimsuit uniform. Teasingly, she dares him to tickle her armpits if he's a real man, but she also backs off when he gets uncomfortably close to her galaxy chocolate spot. Later that day, she watches a reel about a sheep being sheared and suddenly notices his hair looks like it could use a trim. Although he mentions he'll just visit the barber shop, her impatience gets the better of her, and she grabs her brother's shaver. Nervously, he squirms and explains that he doesn't usually get his hair cut so short that a shaver is necessary, so she compromises by using scissors and a comb instead. Initially hesitant and pointing out that it's a lot of work, he eventually gives in after entertaining some wild thoughts and tells her to go ahead and cut his hair. However, Maki conveniently calls Nagatoro, asking her to bring notes to their classroom. This turns out to be a ploy to get her out of the room so they can intervene in Naoto's haircut. Moments later, Maki and Yoshi burst into the room searching for the shaver. When they discover it, they quiz Naoto about his plans, and his explanation inspires them to take things further. Determined to torment him, they decide to give him a baldi, a fate worse than anything he could have imagined. As they close in on completing their chaotic work, Naoto's defense mechanism kicks in. Just when it seems too late, Nagatoro returns to save him from disaster, causing the mischievous duo to flee the scene as usual. After a while, she finishes her haircut, and surprisingly, it turns out fantastic for Naoto. For once, he doesn't resemble a breedable twink working the cash register at Target. Fast forward 2 days, and summer officially kicks off, bringing relentless heat that harasses everyone on their way to school. Nagatoro, ever the mischief maker, asks Neo to join her for some shaved ice. When they arrive at the stall, they discover that the queue stretches on endlessly, rivaling the chaos of the iPhone 15 launch day. Yet her craving for shaved ice is insatiable, and no human-made line could possibly deter her from indulging in the refreshing summer treat. Unfortunately, after standing in line for a grueling 4 hours with no progress, she begins to wilt under the oppressive heat. On the verge of collapsing from heatstroke, our guy steps in, dragging her to a cooler spot where she can escape the relentless sun. After administering what she jokingly refers to as rat poison, she miraculously recovers, springing back to full energy. Determined, she insists on rejoining the line but tells him to hold tight as she needs to whip something up first. Moments later, she returns with a bizarre yet oddly satisfying creation: pure mustard ice cream. The bold flavor choice that only Japan could offer. She devours it with gusto, claiming it's the highlight of her day. Later that evening, she casually informs him that summer break begins the next day and mentions she'll be busy helping her club. Before parting ways, she asks for his contact info. Once she gets his number, she cheerfully warns him, "I'm going to cyberbully you, so you better be ready." Time flies, and before he knows it, a month has passed in what feels like the blink of an eye. Naoto suddenly finds himself in the Genshin Impact loading screen, where a sharply dressed woman informs him that he's the savior of the world. Without much explanation, he's thrown into the map with no glider, and the moment he lands, he's attacked by a monster. To make matters worse, his supposed magical powers are completely ineffective, leaving him scrambling to survive. When Nagatoro bursts onto the scene as Nekotoro, she swiftly dispatches the beast straight to Poseidon's buffet, signaling the beginning of their thrilling journey as adventurers. Together, they face off against countless menacing creatures, fighting their way through hordes of monsters until they ultimately discover the Demon Lord's stronghold. This lair, coincidentally, aligns with the hero's original quest. However, an unexpected twist unfolds. Nagatoro and the group of girls he had heroically saved are revealed to be demon lords in disguise, patiently biding their time for him to unknowingly escort them directly back to their castle. Just as it seems like he's about to endure yet another round of relentless teasing, he suddenly awakens only to find actual demons lingering, awaiting his return to consciousness. The following morning, Nagatoro extends an invitation to the beach, mentioning that it will be their final chance to enjoy summer vacation. Although he initially declines, reluctant and full of self-doubt, he eventually decides to join because deep down he recognizes his own insecurities and resolves to make an effort to enjoy himself. On the way to the beach, his self-esteem takes another hit when the usual trio taunts him, mocking him for being a hopeless loser and a virgin who only listens to Skibidi Toilet. Upon arrival at the beach, Maki dramatically removes her shirt, revealing her impressive figure, with her bountiful peaks drawing his attention, and unfortunately for him, she catches him staring. Yoshi surprises him with a sudden jump scare, flaunting her freshest melons, which startles him enough to make him leave the scene. Later, when he returns with the drinks, the girls eagerly dive into their plans to have the most enjoyable time of their lives. Meanwhile, he finds himself sitting under their shared summer umbrella, trying to focus on finishing his sketches before the season finally comes to an end. As time passes, Nagatoro eventually notices how isolated and lonely he appears. Feeling a mix of concern and mischief, she approaches him and suggests that he should apply some creamy white liquid all over his body to protect himself from the sun's harsh rays. However, just as she's about to offer him sunscreen, he interrupts her with a cheeky comment, saying she can only treat him gently if they're officially dating. Finding his suggestion utterly ridiculous, Nagatoro reacts by stomping him in frustration and playfully pressing her foot against him. The other girls quickly join the fun, escalating the situation into a chaotic moment as they collectively give him a triple foot treatment, leaving him covered in enough sunscreen to hypothetically replace the ozone layer, though of course, that was an exaggeration. Despite the playful antics and over-the-top moments, the group manages to spend their final day of summer vacation in high spirits, and even Naoto eventually admits that he genuinely had a great time. As the summer break draws to a close, the highly anticipated summer festival marks the season's finale, and everyone is dressed in their best summer attire, eagerly awaiting the fireworks display set for later tonight. In Naoto's thoughts, he imagines being with Nagatoro, envisioning her elegantly dressed in a traditional summer yukata. However, instead of acting on these thoughts, he spends his time absorbed in playing a knockoff version of Street Fighter. Despite his attempts to distract himself, he remains restless, anxiously checking his phone and hoping for a text from Nagatoro inviting him, much like the time they went to the beach. Yet, as he debates whether he should take the initiative and invite her himself, he convinces himself it would come across as overly forward and unsettling. After 2 hours of indecision, he decides to head to the festival alone. However, Yoshi and Maki soon spot him, teasing him mercilessly for believing he might coincidentally run into Nagatoro. They inform him that she's occupied assisting her club and won't be able to attend the festival. Disheartened, Naoto tries to leave, but the girls mischievously restrain him, taking a photo and sending it to Nagatoro in an attempt to coax her into coming. A short while later, Nagatoro arrives and, noticing Naoto's predicament, tries to remove the leash held by Maki. Undeterred, Maki challenges her, declaring that she'll have to compete for Naoto's ownership. With the stakes set, both groups dive into a series of competitive minigames scattered around the festival stalls. Before they know it, 2 hours have flown by and they tally their prizes. Nagatoro, with a sly grin, secures Naoto's ownership deed through a crafty bit of bribery. With the games concluded, Yoshi and Maki wander off to enjoy the festival on their own, leaving Naoto and Nagatoro alone together. They stroll through the bustling festival, sampling food and sharing lighthearted banter, with Nagatoro teasing him that the outing feels suspiciously like a date. As the fireworks light up the night sky, she playfully nudges him toward the perfect viewing spot, setting the scene for a memorable summer evening. Much like waiting in the line for shaved ice, watching the fireworks turns into a tedious ordeal. Naoto suggests taking a shortcut, but the line unexpectedly begins to move, and Nagatoro is swept along with it. Left with no alternative, he grabs her and hastily drags her to the prime viewing spot in the city. However, she spoils the atmosphere by teasing him yet again. This time, though, Naoto fires back with a witty retort that makes her second-guess every assumption she's made about what might occur if they were alone in the dark. As if on cue, a massive firework lights up the night sky, revealing couples all around them doing exactly what she imagined. Embarrassed, they quickly retreat back to the bustle of civilization. On their way home, Naoto boldly suggests they come back together next year, and to his surprise, she agrees with one condition. He'll have to wear matching yukatas with her. The next morning on his way to school, Naoto spots Nagatoro hanging out with her friends as usual. They're up to their typical antics, but this time a couple of guys join in. Jealousy bubbles up as Naoto notices how effortlessly these guys interact with the girls, in stark contrast to his awkward attempts. These guys seem to operate on a whole different level, while he feels like a mere mole surrounded by confident wolf-like furies. The situation escalates when one of the guys casually puts an arm around Nagatoro, sparking a surge of anger in Naoto. Determined to assert himself, he attempts to walk over confidently, but an unfortunate misstep on his stick results in a comical blunder that metaphorically announces his arrival like an alarm. Maki and Yoshi notice him immediately and invite him to join their table. The guys, curious about his intentions, question what he's doing there. After a brief moment of hesitation, Naoto musters his courage and declares that he's bought her for 2 elixirs, and that they're leaving, catching everyone by surprise and leaving an unforgettable impression. In a surprising turn of events, he manages to win over 4 girls simultaneously, leaving the blind freaks completely holeless. However, he still ends up being teased again, though by now he's grown accustomed to it and even finds some enjoyment in the ridicule, making it less significant. While spending time with Naoto, Nagatoro takes note of his frail arms and bluntly points out how skinny they are. She then decides to take it upon herself to train him free of charge, confidently declaring that within 2 months, he'll be strong enough to take down anyone who dares to bully him, including her. But when he hears this ambitious plan, he dismisses it as too much effort, especially for someone like him who claims the heaviest thing he can lift is a pencil rather than actual weights. Nagatoro, however, proposes an alternative exercise that doesn't require movement. She instructs him to get on all fours, saying she'll transform his triceps into something resembling those of Kratos. Once he's on the ground, she perches herself on his back and challenges him to maintain the position for 10 minutes without getting aroused. If he fails, she warns he'll be crushed under her weight. Yet, instead of staying focused, he finds himself even more flustered as the situation turns into a bizarre form of edging. The odd exercise is abruptly interrupted when a group of students stumbles upon the scene, causing both of them to awkwardly abandon their role play. Later in the day, Nagatoro shifts gears and asks if he's planning to actually hit the books since midterms are looming. He boldly reassures her that he'll do fine because he's not dumb, but she counters with a warning. Being overconfident might lead him to fail, potentially causing him to repeat a grade. She points out that this could result in them being in the same grade, and if that happens, she'll end up becoming the senpai, which would only invite even more bullying. This unsettling thought motivates him to start studying fervently, as he's determined to avoid being associated with what he describes as poop-for-brains girls. Blondie informs him that they're in a tough spot right now and likely going to repeat the year. To avoid this, Maki and Yoshi approach him for tutoring. Thanks to all the intense studying, he manages to earn some decent grades, ensuring he won't have to repeat. Later that day, Nagatoro hears some suspicious noises coming from the art room. Curious, she opens the door and finds Naoto being cornered by the girls, who are trying to remove a splinter from his finger. She looks visibly annoyed at seeing her favorite toy being messed with by her friends. Determined to intervene, she quickly takes over and removes the splinter herself. On the way home, she challenges him to play rock, paper, scissors with a playful wager. The loser will carry the winner's bag. Confident in her chances, she immediately loses and ends up carrying his bag the whole way. Feeling a bit bad for her, the next time they play, he ensures she wins. This time, she has him carry her on his back while also holding both their bags. After walking a short distance, she starts to lose her balance, and as he tries to steady her, he accidentally grabs her waist. Embarrassed, she jumps off and runs away in a hurry. That night, he finds himself glancing at his phone, hoping she'll reach out. Eventually, she initiates a video call. He hurriedly apologizes for the earlier incident, but she brushes it off, saying it's not a big deal, though it's clear both of them feel awkward and flustered. A few days later, they find themselves stuck together again. While he sketches a lamp, Nagatoro starts shadowboxing, clearly excited. She asks him to spar with her, but being the typical nerd, he ends up as her punching bag. Later, Nagatoro and her friends visit the art room and start messing around, creating some absurd drawings they claim rival Picasso's. When Naoto shows up, he demands to know what they're doing in his space. It turns out their usual hangout spot is overrun by sweaty gamers playing Animal Crossing and they can't get them to leave. So the girls decide to crash the art room instead. Before leaving, they intentionally leave a plant behind to stir up drama and chaos. Maki then confronts Naoto, accusing him of pretending to be a virgin, essentially calling him a fraud. She's ready to roast him, but Nagatoro jumps in to defend him, insisting that he's a passionate guy who's always focused on his art and workouts. Maki mocks her, but Nagatoro challenges her to a bet. If Maki finds a certain magazine in the art room, it proves Naoto is the most cultured person ever, and Maki will have to buy her pancakes. They search for 15 minutes but come up empty-handed because Naoto cleverly hid the magazine in another room. Feeling victorious, Naoto sneaks out, retrieves the hidden magazine, and discreetly plants it behind him. He then calls attention to it, letting Maki discover it. She grabs the magazine, securing her win in the game. The following day, she returns to the art room, and Naoto notices she's sporting a new earring. She explains it's because she recently pierced her ear, which gives her the idea to pierce his ear too, claiming he'd look great with earrings. She even suggests they could wear matching pairs. Flustered by the romantic notion, Naoto blushes but realizes his ears need piercing first. As he nervously closes his eyes to prepare, she teases him for looking so pitiful. Moments later, Sakura enters, teary-eyed, seeking his help. She reveals that a stalker, who happens to be a member of the gaming club, has been tailing her for a while. Terrified, she confesses her fears to the group. Naoto, unimpressed, comments that they'd brought it upon themselves, especially with their previous schemes. Sakura breaks down in tears, and the group pressures him into assisting her. She begs him to pretend to be her boyfriend for a day to deter the stalker. Although Nagatoro opposes the idea, warning about the potential trouble of dealing with two stalkers, she reluctantly agrees. The following day, Naoto dresses in his best boyfriend attire, meeting Sakura shortly afterward. Meanwhile, Nagatoro and her friends discreetly follow them to document the date, though it's clear from her expression that she isn't enjoying the situation. Sakura's clingy behavior complicates things further as she drags Naoto to a spot he's hoping to save for a meaningful first moment with someone special before advancing in their relationship. However, Nagatoro interrupts, putting an end to the situation by performing a citizen's arrest on the creepy guy stalking Sakura, effectively cutting their interaction short. The man grovels an apology, promising never to repeat his behavior. Later that day, Nagatoro and Naoto head home together, with her teasing him about his ruined first moment thanks to her interference. Naoto clarifies that it wasn't a genuine date, and that he was merely helping Sakura, to which Nagatoro remarks that he's not ready for real dates if he's too immature and overly focused on such things. He reluctantly agrees. A week later during PE, Naoto struggles during the marathon, running awkwardly, as if he's in an action movie scene gone wrong, much to Nagatoro's dismay. After school, she confronts him about his poor performance, mocking him for being so weak and pathetic. When he admits his lack of skill in running, she retorts that no one is that bad unless they're missing limbs, insisting that practice is the key. Naoto, stubborn as ever, dismisses her advice, claiming he lacks natural talent for running, which she finds offensive. Determined to prove him wrong, Nagatoro declares she'll train him into shape. That weekend, when they meet, Naoto gets flustered upon seeing Nagatoro's untanned skin, but they begin their running sessions together nonetheless. Upon realizing how incredibly fit she is, he starts picking up speed, eventually overtaking her briefly before she regains the lead, leaving him in the dust. Exhausted after running 5 kilometers without stopping, he's practically done for, but they're still far from the finish line. She notices he's about to give up without giving his best, so she taunts him, calling him a coward and saying even a grade schooler could outperform him. Her words don't help as he ends up running back home, another 5 kilometers. To him, it seems like just a warm-up because she continues to push him, starting with some intense stretches. She demonstrates her flexibility and challenges him to keep up, but when it's finally his turn, he can't move without her assistance. After helping him stretch, she commands him to stand up and begins imitating a Dragon Ball fusion pose, which is exactly what Yoshi thinks of when he sees them. The next day, Naoto starts contemplating ideas for his next painting with the culture festival approaching, knowing it needs to be something that will attract attention. However, finding a model who isn't bullying him or isn't Nagatoro proves challenging. He expresses a preference to draw male models this time, but Nagatoro quickly shuts that down, showing him an embarrassing sketch he made of her last summer and threatening to report him to the principal if he doesn't pick her. Reluctantly, he agrees, but only if she provides her own costume, as he doesn't have a spare cultural outfit lying around. The following day, she shows up wearing nearly the same outfit, ready to be his model. He thought he had finally triumphed, but this situation doubled down on his peculiar obsession. Nagatoro's friends soon arrive, and she informs them that she's modeling for Naoto, but will also be cooking yakisoba at their stall. Everyone shares their plans for the event except Naoto, who hasn't decided what to showcase. The previous year, he simply followed the guidance of the art club president, but with her absent, he now has to figure it out on his own. As usual, the girls tease him, but Nagatoro assures him that they'll assist in drawing attention to the art club with their antics and attractions, including his torment. Suddenly, he hears unmistakable and familiar footsteps approaching from outside. It's the club president. Acting quickly, he instructs everyone to hide in another room while he deals with the situation. President Sana, a stern and authoritative upperclassman overseeing the art club, wastes no time in reprimanding him for the chaos in the room. She informs him that, aside from the art exhibit, she's here to address a serious issue. Troubling rumors are spreading that their art class is turning into a type of hostess club. If he doesn't treat it seriously, she'll be forced to shut down the art club permanently. However, Nagatoro and her friends overhear the situation and intervene before she can submit the closure form. They remind her of all the challenges Naoto has faced and the effort he's put into defending the club, criticizing her for disregarding the club's integrity. Naoto maintained it in her absence, and for her to suddenly decide to shut it down is nothing short of unfair. Hearing this, she tells Naoto that if he's determined to keep the club alive, he'll need to prove its value. She proposes a double art exhibition, where whoever attracts the most visitors will win. If he loses, the art club will be disbanded for good. Although Naoto hesitates to compete against the president, Nagatoro assures him they'll do everything they can to support him. Naoto's friends mock the president for her overly strict and serious demeanor, but he told them not to underestimate Sana. He explained that she's highly skilled, making his chances of victory practically non-existent. Maki suggested they should run a cat-made cafe to easily defeat her, but Naoto reminded them that last year they placed 6th out of over 50 contestants solely because of Sana's contributions and her exceptional talent. Beyond her organizational skills, Sana is an extraordinary artist, winning competitions against high school and even college students. When Maki asked why Sana was so popular, Naoto revealed their prize-winning artwork, a highly revealing self-portrait of hers with that guy yat, which everyone, including him, adored. Despite this, with Nagatoro as his model, he knew he was already outmatched and resigned himself to taking the L. After all, he wasn't confident about competing against someone he admired, especially since Sana was a proven artist, while his only notable achievement was enduring Nagatoro's playful teasing. Even Maki and the others joked that Nagatoro couldn't rival Sana's assets, which were described as Mount Everest. However, Naoto countered that while Nagatoro lacked certain physical attributes, she had the spirit, which didn't do much to improve their odds. They realized they'd still lose even with a Kachiro cosplay. Later, after school, Nagatoro asked Naoto if he really thought they could win against Sana's remarkable artwork. Though it seemed doubtful, Naoto assured her that her natural charm and everyday looks would be their winning edge. For the next few days, he focuses on painting her, with Nagatoro occasionally striking a pose. However, Naoto struggles to draw well, particularly under the mounting pressure. He explains to her that he won't drag or name an image only to be mocked by others if he loses the bet. Instead, he plans to take the L and give up on the art club. She reassures him that she doesn't care what others think, but he insists it's a matter between him and Sana. The following day, he enters the room to find that Sana has already split the art club in half so they can each concentrate on their work. Determined to succeed, Naoto picks up his brush and begins practicing. After hours of uninterrupted painting, he creates something decent enough for home decoration but not up to the standards of a cultural festival. The club president then appears, critiques his work, and points out that it's terrible at best because it lacks something essential. When Naoto asks what it's missing, she replies that it's lacking love and passion, the most critical elements of any artist's work. Moments later, Nagatoro arrives, immediately assuming the president is modeling for Naoto due to her outfit. In a panic, she runs off, but the president urges Naoto to chase after her, claiming that's what art is about. When he finally catches up to her, he asks her to model for him again, recalling the teasing and tender moments they shared. Despite this, she resists, suggesting he just let the president do it since that seems to work. She accidentally slips and nearly falls into the pool, but he catches her hand and says he really wants to draw her just as she is because that's what he finds most attractive. The cultural festival finally arrives, and after much effort, Naoto has something to present to the audience, a simple portrait of Nagatoro. Maki notices how well he captured her, almost as if it's from the perspective of a boyfriend. Of course, he denies it and says he just wanted to show an appealing side of Nagatoro. However, there's a challenge. They still don't know what the president, Sana, has painted. They investigate, and Nagatoro asks if he's going to check it out. He says he doesn't want to compare himself to the president and feel discouraged, so she reassures him, saying he has a chance of winning. But when they see her piece, Nagatoro is stunned, realizing there's no way they can win over the crowd, especially given how incredible the president's work is. According to Maki, last year's piece was already impressive, but the president outdid herself this year. Determined not to give up, Nagatoro tells everyone to gear up because they'll lose for sure if they can't improve their situation. After completing their preparations, Senna asks Naoto about his work and confidently tells him she won't lose just because he's her junior, challenging him to push his limits. Later, some interviewers ask about their motivations. While the president explains her vision fluently, Naoto struggles to articulate his. Before they can leave, however, the tour is interrupted by Nagatoro ambushing them and performing their famous TikTok dance, which for some reason is widely popular among the students. This is all just a ploy to attract people to Naoto's art exhibit. Maki encourages Nagatoro to bully people, as that's what she's good at, and it surprisingly works well. As the hours pass, more people flock to both exhibits, checking out Nagatoro's everyday looks compared to the president's ultra-revealing painting, which leaves the boys thrilled and the men captivated. Thanks to Nagatoro's charm, Naoto is trending all over the school, even attracting the attention of some eyeless girls who ask him to teach them how to draw. Later, Maki suggests they grab lunch together, so Naoto invites Nagatoro to eat outside. However, she's a bit upset about the attention he's getting from the girls visiting his exhibit. He reassures her that all the compliments and praise he's received are thanks to her time and effort in volunteering as his model. He admits that if he had done it alone, it would have ended poorly, essentially saying she brought vibrancy to his dull and monotonous life. Deeply grateful for her support despite the teasing, they spend the rest of the day enjoying the cultural festival, exploring the various food stalls set up around the school. When they return to check the results, they find a crowd gathered outside their art club. It turns out the student council deemed the president's artwork too inappropriate for high school students and unsuitable for the festival. The council president tells Senna that, while art is subjective, she cannot justify exposing her melons in an artistic manner and call it acceptable art. However, she's pushing things too far, and for the first time ever, Naoto stands up to defend the president's honor, explaining that art holds cultural significance and isn't confined to their idea of the correct interpretation. He asserts that the president's artwork, despite its provocative nature, inspired him to elevate his artistic style, specifically by drawing Nagatoro's portraits. He finds it deeply unfair to remove the president's piece simply because they think it's too damn good. Nagatoro also speaks up, telling the student council president that the painting is a true masterpiece, with Yoshi supporting them by showing footage of art experts admiring President Senna's Himalayan mountain landscapes. With the issue resolved, President Senna announces she's allowed to continue but gives the victory to Naoto, acknowledging that he's been the one sustaining the art club all along. As the loser, she agrees to fulfill a condition, wearing a bunny girl costume. She remarks that while being pressured to sell merchandise for the girls might feel oppressive, she considers this type of oppression to be a form of art as well. Meanwhile, the girls benefit from President Senna's uninhibited creativity during the festival. Afterward, Nagatoro catches up with Naoto, panicking when she thinks the president is undressing. But the president instead offers insightful critique of Naoto's art. She acknowledges that while his work might lack polish, it's filled with heartfelt emotion, which she admires. The announcer then reveals a concert is coming up, prompting Maki and the others to rush off to enjoy it. The next day, life returns to normal, and the art club continues, which means Naoto won't be venturing into politics anytime soon. Most importantly, he earns a heartfelt kiss at the end, his well-deserved reward after enduring a season of teasing and antics from the girls.